Hey students, and welcome to midterm. I will be looking over here at my computer screen and you will see my little head slowly dissolve into the corner. So let's get into midterm and talk about what we'll be doing. So for our midterm project, this is pretty exciting. What we're doing here is we're wrapping together all the skills we've learned so far. So that will include masking, adjustments, healing, and then a new skill we learned, or we will be learning this module, is realistic shadows. So I will walk you through all of that. But just to give you a brief overview of what's going on here, is that we have a fixer-upper. So I have multiple files for you to choose from, and I will show them down here. So there is about 6, and please only choose one, but you will use this as the base for your project. And then your client will be one of your classmates. So you will look at our first post linked here, and you will pick either a classmate or a teacher, and you will design to their style that they indicated. So it's very strategic why I asked that. It's because I was going to use it for your midterm. So make sure to go back and look at that. But essentially what we're doing here is you will get that Photoshop file. You will touch up any peeling paint, wallpaper, scratches, etc. You will add 20 masked items, and then you'll add 20 adjustments. So if you want, you can do one adjustment per masked item, or you can stack multiple adjustments on the same masked item. I just need 20 adjustments and 20 masks. And then I need small evidence of healing and then 5 realistic shadows. So you'll have about 2 weeks to do this. So make sure to take your time on it and really submit something that you're proud of. So this is our midterm assessment, so it is a big portion of your grade, so make sure to check the syllabus. So this will be a bigger assignment, so make sure to take your time on this. So I want to just walk you through quick what's going on. So I have everything here listed out for the shadows, because the shadows get a little complex, but once you do it, it becomes kind of second nature. So make sure to look through that, and I'll also be going over it in this video, but I want to give you a few expectations on what I'm looking for on your project. So when you submit your PSD file, I'm going to need to see evidence of a few things. And so I will need to see a realistic shadow. We need 5 of those total. Keep in mind, we're not putting a realistic shadow on all 20 masked items. That would take all day. We're only going to do 5, and I suggest doing the ones that are the 5 biggest in your composition. So couches, chairs, tables, anything that takes up a lot of room, make sure to do those first. And then also we'll need to make sure that we're adding adjustments, so you can see that my chair here is masked. And then in addition, I have an adjustment. And then below I have my shadow. So you'll need 20 masked items and then 20 adjustments. And one thing I want to challenge you to do when you are doing your healing and cloning is make sure to always do a new layer for your healing and cloning. So I'm going to call this healing here. And we did this in our very first or second module. And I just go up to the little band-aid here and I do sample all layers, and I can start to adjust this to a smaller size, and I can start to heal certain areas. So this is in the rubric. So make sure to absolutely review all components of the rubric, because I will be following that closely. And if you look here, this heal is on its own layer. So remember our concept of pixel preservation? We definitely want to keep that concept going. So I will be looking for that. That is about 10 to 20 points of your grade on this project out of 200. So absolutely make sure to do that. It'll bring you down a half letter grade if you don't. So make sure that that healing is on its own layer. I use the terms healing and cloning interchangeably. Very similar in a sense. Cloning can refer to the stamp tool as well, but I encourage you to use that healing spot brush tool that I was just using. It's much easier to use and has better control. And if you remember from earlier modules, a lot of you had tips, and your tip was to create the brush very small and work in tiny little isolated areas. So make sure to follow that. Okay, so in your midterm, I covered a few things. First thing I covered is masking. We have 20 items. Adjustments, we have 20 adjustments. And remember, with an adjustment, I can add multiple adjustments to one item. By going down to this half moon, I can do, for example, vibrance. And remember, this is super important. I need to right click and create clipping mask. So that was something that we learned a while back. So make sure you're doing that. I will be looking for it. And you see here how I stacked multiple on top of each other for one item? Make sure to do that. I will be looking for that. You can, of course, do one per masked item. I want you to do what works best for you. And then also, please take creative liberty here. If you want to change the wall colors, or if you're not happy with something, Please apply a new wallpaper, apply a new finish, do whatever you need to do. You have full creative freedom, you're okay. I gave you your classmate as your client within reason, but we only really gave a description that was about a sentence. So you can fill in the gaps here, and it will be really cool. Someone might choose you as their client, which is kind of special. So that's why I'm doing that. It's just fun to see in the comments, create a little community in our online class. So that really is an introduction to it. So let's get to the shadows. We're about at 5 minutes in this video, and based off your feedback, y'all like shorter videos, so I'm trying my best to keep them short and sweet. But I'm going to walk you through the shadows, and so make sure to please review the show notes down below. I spend a lot of time making those, and it's step by step with screenshots. So watch this video first on advanced shadows, and then read that as you're going through it, and it will help you quite a bit, I promise. Okay, so I have my chair here already masked. That is super important. Make sure to start with that masked. And I have an example here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that in a folder, and I'm going to call it old. And what I'll do now is I'll create a new folder called new example, and that will be for us. I just want to show you the end product. So I'm just going to grab this layer here. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer of that mask for simplicity's sake, just to show you my process. So always start for realistic shadows with a nice crisp masked image. So if you look closely, I took my time and made sure this was pretty well done. And what I'm going to do next is I want to make sure that my layer is selected, all right? And once my layer is selected, and again, this may feel fast, but it's all in the show notes. So once my layer is selected, I'm going to go down to the FX. And FX literally sounds like the word effects. That's why it's abbreviated that way. So click down here once, scroll all the way to the bottom to drop shadow. And we want to do a few things here. So make sure you're paying attention. We want our blend mode on multiply. If you remember from our Kodak project, blend mode affects how a texture layer image layers on top of something. It makes it semi-see-through, adds texture, adds noise, etc. So let's do multiply, and multiply will allow that layer to be more transparent, almost like a ghost, and you can see through it. So make sure your opacity is set to 100, and then your angle, that doesn't matter at this point, but our distance, spread, and size will be 0, and our angle doesn't matter because we don't have any spread on that shadow. And so once I have that, I want to make sure that my contour is set to this first one here, linear. Otherwise, we'll get some really interesting shapes. So always set that to linear. And we want to make sure use global light is unchecked. We don't need that at the time. And then noise at 0, and layer knocks out drop shadow checked as well. And once I have that, I'm going to click OK. All right, and so we did it right. If you saw a very faint shadow around it, that means we're moving in the right direction. Our next step will be to go down to Effects and right click, okay, on this word right here that says Effects. And I want you to do Create Layer. I understand it may feel like I'm blowing through this and going quick, 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 but I want you to know that we can slow these down. We can rewind. It's here for a reason. This is very much intentionally videotaped. So make sure to take advantage of that in my show notes as well. So I have this down here below placed, and you can see if I move my top item, I have my chair underneath it. So I picked quite a complex chair. I do not recommend doing that because the shadows get really funky. So what I want to do is I want to click on my top image here, and I want to lock that. And I want to go down to the shadow here and just move it slightly so I can see it. Okay, I know that's there. And if you remember from prior projects, we worked a lot on this, on transformations. Go up to Edit, Transform, okay? And then we want to flip vertical. Once we have that, we can start to kind of line it up just like that, okay? And we want to look at where that light's coming. We don't need to be experts here. We want it to look natural. Does it have to be totally realistic? No. But do we want it to not look weird? Yes. So there's a fine line here. You can see my example here is not totally perfect, but it's semi-believable. So just do your best here. So once I have that, I want to go up to Edit, Transform, and I want to make sure I have my warp selected. And here, I can just start to kind of just piece together the different portions and start making that feel good. Okay, and again, we're not aiming for perfection, we're aiming for believability. And then let's say I want to skew that a bit. I can just and skirt that. And you know what? Hey, that's pretty dang good. So once I have that, I'm going to do what we call a mask. So if you remember, we've been literally doing masking all semester. So you can see why I'm kind of nerding out and getting excited over this midterm, because we're really bleeding together all of these beautiful concepts we've been working so hard on: transformations, adjustments, masking, and just marrying them together. So once I have that, I want to click my mask here, okay? And again, refer to the show notes. This gets a little complex, so I want you to feel confident. So have those show notes up as you're doing this. So once I have that mask, make sure it's selected. I want to make sure that my foreground color down here on the left is white and my background is black. And once I have that, I'm going to click on my gradient tool up here and make sure that this is set to gradient, and that my gradient down here under basics, I have this first one in black and white selected. And I want to make sure that this linear portion is selected here, and then my mode is normal and opacity at 100. Okay, so once I do that, I can start to just simply draw, okay, and just fade out that shadow. So you want to start at your image and then work away towards it. So if you see that, that's giving a good definition of the shadow and making it feel a little more realistic. So you can stretch that out as needed, but that is just a way to do that. Okay, so our next step, make sure that we have that selected, okay? Our layer, we want to go up to Filter, Blur Gallery, not Blur, make sure it's Blur Gallery, and Field Blur. And we have these little pins here, so we want to hit a pin, okay? And then use this little dial and make sure that the base of the shadow is more crisp, and then pin it again down here and make sure that's a little more faded. Okay? So you can do as many pins as you want. I think that's good enough. And I'm going to go back to this here, turn my opacity down just a little bit, okay? And then I want to make sure that my blending mode is on multiply, and that looks good. And if you have a different blending mode you prefer, go ahead and use that. They all work very well. We can use pin length, for example. But just to really the cherry on top to make sure that this is feeling good is that our share feels too bright in this environment. So if you remember, we did a ton of adjustments prior. I'm doing a brightness adjustment, and make sure to always right click there and create clipping mask. And so I'm going to turn that brightness down, and you can start to see, hey, that feels really good. So that is just a very quick introduction. I know, oh my goodness, that was a lot, like 5 different steps, but let me recap it real quick for you and keep it super simple. So we started by clearly masking the item, all right? And once we masked it, we applied a drop shadow, and we made that drop shadow into its own layer, and then we used transformations to reflect, skew, and warp it. And once we had that, we went into a mask, and we did some mask with a gradient to create that gradual from solid to light. And after that, we went into our effects and did our gallery blur and did field blur. So that's just a few ways. This will really take your work to the next level. I even could refine this further and make it a little better, but for all intents and purposes for this class, this level of performance is more than enough. So just keep in mind that is how we do shadows, and make sure, please look at those show notes, because this is really complex unless you want to rewatch this a few times. So now that we have that done, go ahead and do this. I want you to have full creative freedom here, okay? Take what your client has, your classmate, look in that discussion, and be playful and fun with this. Kind of lean in. I know we don't really know each other, but just pretend like you do and do the best you can. You can even choose me if you want. Just please make it look nice. Totally kidding. I don't really grade too much on aesthetics. I just make sure that what you put in matches more or less the client and what they enjoy based off of what they have in that post. So have fun with this, okay? So we have a full week to work on this, and then we have our spring break. So I give my students a week to work on this, but this semester we're lucky with our spring break, so we get 2 weeks. But I don't like my students working during spring break. That's time for you to relax as a human being and do what you have to do. So please make sure to do that. And if this is the fall semester, just future-proofing this, you can ignore that. Okay, you do not have spring break. Unfortunately, I wish we had spring break in the fall. That'd be a nice little break. But anyways, we are halfway. I'm super proud of everyone. I know I ask for a lot in my projects. Masking 20 things is a lot, putting things together, adjustments. But my point for you, as someone who's a registered interior designer, is that you're going to take these skills and you are going to grow and show them to others within the profession. Be like, hey, you know what? Photoshop, I learned at Slick, is a pretty dang good tool. And I can design things and make them look really good and professional. And, I know transformations, adjustments. I can do drop shadows. I can do realistic shadows. I can do all of these things. And with the whole kind of theme being masking and pixel preservation. Okay, so I will wrap it up there. If you have any questions, shoot me a message on Canvas, and I will see you after midterm. After midterm, it's literally all downhill from here. It's creative projects. We're just applying the skills we learned, and so there really isn't anything new. It's more or less just having fun. Okay. All right, everyone, I will see you in the next one. Thanks.